Let's talk about Arsenal. They went away to Sunderland and drew 2-2. And Sunderland, with all due respect, are an absolute nightmare to play against. And they are quite happy to play into that narrative. They pulled the advertising boardings in an extra 2 metres, so it reduced the amount of area on the side of the pitch that Arsenal could try and wind up for long throws from. There was sort of tactics about delaying the restarts. They were roughing up. They were being a little bit physical. They were poking Arsenal. They were bullying Arsenal. And actually, I think Arsenal largely dealt with it very, very well in a hostile environment as well, until they didn't. And in that moment, Brian Brobby scores the goal, which is a very late equaliser. But when you win the league, you aren't going to win every single game. There are going to be matches that you're going to struggle in. And actually, you wonder whether this is 2 points dropped or a point gained at a very difficult place.
Yeah, at the end of the season, they might look upon it as an important point. It will feel like 2 points dropped just because the equaliser came so late. But I make you right. I think Sunderland were well worth a share of the spoils. And I wonder if they've actually laid down the blueprint of how to disrupt this Arsenal team. Because I think at times during this 10-game winning run, 8 of them without conceding, they've almost beaten teams in the tunnel, much like the great United side under Sir Alex Ferguson used to do. Their opponents have shown them far too much respect. Sunderland didn't do that. They were in their faces. They were direct. They made it, as you say, very hostile, and they got their awards. David Raya is a brilliant goalkeeper, but we were watching the goals back yesterday morning. I do wonder if he stays on his line rather than coming to try and claim the ball for the equaliser. Does Brian Brobby score? I think it's a much more difficult finish if the goalkeeper is actually in his net rather than in no man's land. So I think that does go down as a mistake from Raya, and maybe that was a byproduct of Sunderland putting all those long balls into the box.
Maybe, just maybe. I mean, I think you have to also acknowledge, don't you, Kevin, that they have a serious number of injuries. They did this Saturday with no Victor Gyökeres, who I think was actually quite a big miss. No Martin Ødegaard, no Madueke, no Martinelli. They've had to shuffle and change, especially at the top end of the pitch. And that's before we get to Kai Havertz and Gabriel Jesus as well. So Arsenal negotiating this period without all of that talent, I suppose, needs to be recognised.
Yeah, it does. And I think Trossard's really stepped up. Another great goal from him. There was talk in the summer of were Bayern interested in him? Could he move on? But he stayed put and he's played really, really well, I think, in a lot of games where he's been called upon. But you're right. And that's why you have to have a really deep squad. And I think it just so happens that so many of those injuries have been concentrated at the top end of the pitch. But I look at their defensive depth, and it is beyond belief, really, when you look at all of the options they have. And they have lots of players who can play multiple positions as well. Guys like Calafiori and Nkapie who can cover that left-back or centre-back role. Timber's versatile. You've got lots of different options there. But yeah, you're right. They're having to kind of mix and match. But this is part of Arsenal's evolution. They've spent heavily, rightly. I think they've spent well in a lot of areas. And they are now in a position where I think they can challenge at home and abroad. But yeah, they are being really tested at the moment by those injuries. I thought Sunderland were excellent. I've been so impressed with them. Because the interesting thing about them, I commentated on their game against Everton recently. And they started that game appallingly. They conceded a goal. They had a bit of a collective blackout where they were making the most basic mistakes. And the crowd pulled them through. And once the crowd had pulled them through and they got that equaliser early in the second half, they suddenly looked as though they were the only team that were going to go on and win it. And when you're a promoted team, that connection between you and the home fans is so important. It's so important because there will be games where you're not playing particularly well because the team you're playing are better than you, but they can drag you through and either turn a defeat into a draw or a draw into a win. I think that's going to be critical for them.
I think Timber, Ben White, Calafiori, Miles Lewis-Skelly, Nkapie, Gabriel, Mosquera and Saliba are without doubt the best group of defenders that you could assemble in the Premier League this season. As a group,
terrifying,
I think
isn't it?
There's literally nobody better. Yeah, he is.
Nkapie is a guy that's like maybe your second or third change. And I think he's a guy that, a lot of top clubs have looked at and thought about spending big money for. Arsenal brought him in, and he's a depth piece in their defensive unit. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, well, listen, that's what you need if you're going to be a top team that are going to challenge for top honours. But you also did a top goalkeeper. I know that Crook was a little bit critical of the fact that he came off the line for the equalising goal right at the very end. But it shouldn't be sort of missed that he also made an unbelievable save from Brian Brobby just before that with the effort from the long throw. You might have remembered it. It was tossed into the box and then he got down brilliantly, not once but twice. So, listen, I think he's a major asset, and I don't think listen, he's not immune from criticism, but he's certainly been a major piece in the puzzle for Mikel Arteta. Declan Rice's pressing for the equaliser was absolutely superb, and I think he's been on top form as well. And interestingly, you can probably look at it several different ways, but I think that Arsenal will look at the table at this point of the season and go 4 points clear. We've had a lot of injuries. We went on a good unbeaten run. We did get a little bit of an upset, but we can't win every game. 4 points at this stage of the season, I think we'll take that going into the busiest period.
A big week, though, isn't it, after the international break? What is it? Tottenham at home in the North London derby, Bayern Munich, and then Chelsea. So we'll know a lot more about Arsenal.
Do you want to go to some of those games? Should we go to some of those games together?
Yeah, I think we should go to a couple.
Want to go to North London derby?
I fancy that.
Okay. What about the Chelsea game? You fancy that as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll come on then. We'll do it.
Nice,
Let's do it.
Nice local one.
Why not? Let's just do it. We'll go there. All right, we'll do that. We'll bring you all the reaction to it as well right here on Premier League All Access.